record.
Okay, let's do share screen first. Okay, can start now. Okay, ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, I'd like to ask you, how about the technicality of a peace process? You know, with the long experience of the Philippine peace process, and in fact, in the Bangsamoro peace process, you have had two tracks of negotiations. First one was with the MNLF, and the second one is with the MILF. How do you get the peace process going, given the longevity and the many obstacles, I'm sure, you know, in as part of the national agenda in the Philippines? Can you tell us, like, what can you advise to all those countries who are struggling with their own peace processes?
I think number one, you need a constituency. The decision makers are political leaders, and they will look at what they think their people are supporting or looking at. The first time when we pushed for peace talks, in the Coalition for Peace, that was in 1986, when in the first 100 days, President Cory Aquino called for peace talks, but the peace talks broke down. The peace talks broke down, and this was with the communists, and the communist panel. Well, they all left and went underground, and we were a small group, and we called for a return to the peace table, and pretty much the reaction to us was we were naive dreamers, idealists, that thinking that a peace process could work when everyone else was thinking, no, you need a military solution now. We've tried and it doesn't work. And what we did was, okay, then we stopped. And on both sides, that was pretty much the reaction on both sides, both with government and with the armed rebels. And so we said, okay, it looks like they won't listen to us until they see that we have a constituency, until they see that we are big and that we are citizens, and that, as I said earlier, they say they are fighting for us. Well, we want you to talk. We want you to go back to the negotiating table. So how did we build a constituency? It was doing all sorts of initiatives. We had a tent city for peace when Congress opened, actually putting up tents on the Congress grounds that people, where we asked people to be there, doing all sorts of activities, art activities for children, etc., until we packed up with an activity where we threw a balloon up in the air and kept it up because we said that is the peace that has to keep going. And in communities, they were putting up flags calling for peace, and it was just that constantly. When Christmas came, we called for a people's Christmas ceasefire because we said this is what counts to us. Until it became a constituency that President Cory Aquino then said, okay, the security cluster will talk to you. What exactly are your agenda? And with President Ramos came on board, he brought in more civil society discussions for the national peace agenda, etc. So for me, that's the first one. you have to build a group, you have to build a constituency, and that constituency needs to be what, patient and faithful. The peace process is going to be it's sometimes seasonal. When things are going well, people need it. You're going to have people that are going to be there all the time and keep their eye on the ball.
Well,
And then finding a way to talk to allies in government, because there are allies in government. They're not the top person, but finding people around them who can begin to bring you to the table.
one observation is that a lot of all these peace building activities really developed also among many organizations in Mindanao. But their challenge was really, how do you bring it as part of the national consciousness, making sure that especially people in Manila would understand why the communities in Mindanao are the ones really supporting this peace process. So how did it come about, getting the peace agenda as part of the national agenda?
Okay, that was an opportunity that we took when we were at OPAPP. Of course, we kept our link with Mindanao CSOs, and every time I would go down, I would make sure to talk to them. But we were very conscious that if this was just seen as a Mindanao agenda, that the peace process would not be able to go far. It had to be supported by others, by a national constituency. And that is what we worked on when we were in OPAPP. We had what we call we had a project where we had ambassadors for peace. We asked public personalities, showbiz people, celebrities, yes, to talk on the peace process. And so some of them were very popular actors, male and female, and somebody was saying, aren't you trivializing it by having them be your to talk about peace? And I said, if I post anything in my Facebook, how many do I have? 500 followers. They won't even all see me. But this actress, she has 5 million followers. I said,
oh, okay.
When she tweets, and that was part of their commitment.
Okay.
When she tweets, that comes across. And so you had this, the ambassadors for peace. We had a fashion show, a fashion designer who during Fashion Week did his catwalk was of Mindanao fabrics.
Oh, yeah,
and that was the spiel that was going on. So people became conscious, because Manila, people love the ethnic weaves, but you can't just love the weaves. We have to understand also the story behind this. And that was his part of contribution. There was a chef. She went to Mindanao, picked up some of the recipes from Bangsamoro and served it, and would talk about it in her restaurant. And we had the head of one of the national carriers. What is this? Messenger. They were the ones that were doing bringing deliveries across the islands. And he said, I will have our messengers wear T-shirts with the peace sign.
Okay.
Great.
You're very creative, huh?
Yeah. So we have that way. We had campaigns like postcards for peace. So we would ask people to write postcards to their congresspersons and all of that. So, and we were very conscious of surveys. That the survey polls were would begin to take on what is your position on peace? Do you support the peace process? And we saw that during that time, the numbers became quite high. So by the time that we signed the CAB, it was a it was a national celebration. It was a national celebration. It wasn't just a Mindanao event. And that's why we held that signing. It's a big event in Mindanao, in Malacanang. And brought the MILF people over, but also have all of these activities around to show that there was support here. So that's important. There's the civil society constituency that will do a lot of work, and some of that is what I call housework. That's going to be boring work. But there's also that work of keeping it in the public mind and looking at our message was whatever you are, wherever you are, you can do something for peace. So that was the message. Peace is not just for those who sit on the table, and especially they're not just for the combatants. It's not just for government and the armed party. That peace, even if it seems far away, does affect your life and your future.
How about the indigenous peoples groups? Because early on in the peace processes, that has always been the criticism, but eventually we saw that in this recent peace agreement, there were more participation from the indigenous people. How did it come about?
Well, actually, from the very first, when we reconstituted the peace process under President Aquino, in the first panel that we had a representative from the indigenous peoples from Mindanao, Mayor Piang was a member of the indigenous people, and we kept that, because we were also, Ie and I had also worked on the pushing of the IPRA, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. So for us in the government side, that was always there, and it was also we were also always pushing it and working with the indigenous people's constituencies on the ground. But yeah, admittedly, that was one of the hard issues, to find a position that would be acceptable to both sides, because of course, on the side of the MILF, working for an autonomous region, they didn't just want to adopt the national law. We have a very progressive national law on indigenous people. So how to recognize and honor that autonomy, at the same time push for the highest standard that we could have in terms of indigenous people's rights. But again, that meant building a constituency and talking to the talking to that organized constituency on the ground and elsewhere in the Philippines, to push it, to continue to push it. And in fact, until the law was passed, the issue of indigenous peoples was one of those that continued to be articulated and fortified.
Okay. To end our session, perhaps what we would like to ask you is that what advice can you give to younger women who are aspiring or who are already participating to become negotiators, mediators, and who are active also in peace building here in ASEAN? So any concrete advice that you can give them? How can they further develop themselves, and how can they ensure that they continue to push forward, the women's agenda in peace and conflict processes in the region?
Yes. Well, one, you have to be patient. You have to prepare to be that this is a long haul. This is a long haul. As I said in my own experience, 1986 when we started this, I didn't have all of this white hair then. Yet, by the time that we had that groundbreaking comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, that was so many years, decades of work. There's no magic one. I think that's the first thing. No magic one. No shortcuts. No shortcuts. Shortcuts, I will have to say, don't work. Don't accept shortcuts because they don't work. And so be prepared for that. It's not going. There are very exciting times in the peace process, but there are times that it's going to be boring and just seem to be a lot of work and a lot of doing things over and over again. You have to prepare for that. Having said that, I think important to develop is an area, a special area, an area of specialization of an issue that is going to be on the table, because that's going to need to be there. When you don't want shortcuts, it means you need to know the issue all around, from top to bottom. Try to develop your specializations without losing your rootedness on the ground. It's very important that you don't just get caught up in the issue and forget that you're doing it because there are people on the ground who are actually suffering from it. But when you do specialize in an issue, when you are on the table, especially as young people, don't be afraid of thinking out of the box. I think that's the lesson now in the ICIP, the fact that what was in the box doesn't seem to be working. It's a time for thinking out of the box. And as young people, that should be your special gift, to be able to not just stay in the box that we older people have left you with, that there may be new ways of addressing these issues. But also don't be afraid of showing your emotions. I think at the time it was seen in our negotiations, how every time we signed, that there were tears, that it was emotional. And I think that's important to be seen by people, that in the end, the peace process is about people. And that especially as women, that we show it. We show it, we show that the process is not just the hard political negotiations on the table, that there were lives that were touched, that your own life and your own emotions have been involved, because it has to be about people. And when you sign an agreement, people have to see that these are about people, and people have emotions, and emotions help to carry us through. And very important, just never forget that you keep on pushing the agenda of women. Always look for women in the table. Always look for women wherever you go. Where are they? When you go to a community and it's just all the men that come to you, you ask, where are the women? When you're talking to the other side, you can also ask them, where are the women? We kept asking that of the MNLF and the MILF until they brought their women in. Because it won't be complete without the women. And then you have to be there as a woman. I always would say that picture of the signing of the comprehensive agreement, where in the government side there were how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 women out of 7 on the government side.
Okay.
I said that was so. I like to think that was so important for young girls. For young girls to see that important moment and know that that could be women could do it, and she can do it, and she can do more, she can do even more. Never forget that you are representing a gender that has been excluded for so long and will continue to be excluded unless we continue to push at every table, wherever we are, at every community, at every moment, that women, one half of the population, we should be there. We have to help decide how things go. Our concerns need to be concerns that are looked at the table and be given solutions.
How about the real security threat, especially for women who are working in ongoing armed conflict? Like a good example is, we don't have to look very far, is the ongoing civil disobedience movement in Myanmar. And we see that there are actually a lot of young women that we see who are really persevering to bring peace in their country. What can you say to them, in terms of, their physical security, their well-being? Is there anything that you can advise to them?
Well, we always have to keep that in mind, and it needs special attention, and the international community has to recognize that women are more at risk in times of actual armed conflict and armed hostilities. And women have to take care of themselves as much as they can, but not let it paralyze them, not let it stop them from what has to be done. And women who, and it's our responsibility as women advocates who are not in that particular situation to keep on raising it and to keep it as part of the conversation, both why talks need to happen, why peace processes need to happen, and why in the aftermath of conflict, these are things that still need to be looked at, that in transitional justice issues, in packages of compensation, that what women have had to go through, what women have had to suffer, which is always more than the men, always women suffer more from armed conflict, that these still have to be part of it, and they have to be part of the beneficiaries of peace dividends, because that was in fact one of the very strong motivations for us when we looked at the GPH-MNLF peace agreement, that the peace packages, the peace dividends were being coursed through base commanders who were men. And as we would see, that didn't always reach the ground. While whatever was passed through the women's cooperatives, even they were such small packages, but they kept families alive, and their benefits reached the community more. So in the post-conflict situation that they have, they cannot be forgotten, and especially it shouldn't happen as it has in too many situations where women are there fighting, women are there keeping families afloat during times of conflict, and yet when the peace agreements are signed, women are told that they have no more place, that they belong to the house, that's where they should be, and they have no more part. They have no part in making public decisions. No, women are part of the fight for peace. We struggle. We carry a big burden here, and we should be there when peace is done to continue to help shape the future of our communities, the future of our country.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ging. And I'm sure our students have learned a lot from this session. And we wish you all the best in all your participation at the international community, pushing for women in the peace processes, especially that you have had such a rich experience from the Philippines. Again, thank you very much. And then this ends our session for Module 4.
Thank you.